My name is Sarah Mitchell, 26 years old, and I thought I knew what family loyalty meant. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I believed my parents when they told me about the college trust fund my late grandfather had supposedly left for me. That belief sustained me through years of working multiple jobs to pay for my education, until the day I discovered the devastating truth that would tear my family apart forever. For 4 years, I worked double shifts at a campus coffee shop, tutored struggling students for extra cash, and lived on ramen noodles while my parents lived in luxury, all funded by money that was rightfully mine. The betrayal ran so deep that when I finally uncovered the truth, it would take a lawsuit, police involvement, and the complete destruction of family relationships to get justice. Before I dive into this story of deception and justice, let me know in the comments where you're reading from. Don't forget to upvote if you think family accountability matters, even when it hurts. I grew up in a comfortable suburban neighborhood in Beaverton, just outside Portland. Our 2-story colonial house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac lined with maple trees that turned brilliant colors each fall. The house featured a wraparound porch, 3 bedrooms, and a finished basement where my sister and I spent countless hours playing. My parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, had built what appeared to be a successful middle-class life. Dad worked as a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company, driving company cars and attending medical conferences across the Pacific Northwest. Mom managed the office for a local dental practice, handling patient scheduling, insurance billing, and inventory management. Our family seemed picture perfect from the outside. We took annual vacations to the Oregon coast, attended church regularly, and participated in community events. My parents hosted dinner parties for Dad's colleagues and Mom's book club friends. They appeared financially stable and socially connected, the kind of couple other families looked up to and admired. My younger sister Jessica was 3 years behind me, and we had what I thought was a typical sibling relationship, competitive but loving. She was always the artistic one, talented at painting and photography, with an eye for colour and composition that impressed even her high school art teachers. Her bedroom walls were covered with her landscape photographs and abstract paintings. She dreamed of attending art school in California and becoming a professional photographer. I, on the other hand, gravitated towards science and mathematics. I excelled in AP calculus, chemistry and physics, often tutoring classmates who struggled with these subjects. My bedroom was filled with science fair trophies and academic achievement certificates. Our parents seemed proud of both of us, attending school events religiously and celebrating our achievements with family dinners and some small gifts. Dad would brag to his colleagues about his genius daughter who was headed for engineering school, while Mom would show off Jessica's artwork to anyone who visited our home. They appeared supportive and engaged, the kind of parents who drove kids to practice, helped with homework, and never missed a school performance or athletic event. The person who shaped my understanding of hard work and perseverance was my grandfather, William Bill Mitchell. Grandpa Bill was a quiet, steady man who had built a successful small construction company from nothing. Standing just over 6 feet tall with weathered hands and kind blue eyes, he commanded respect through his actions rather than his words. After serving 2 tours in Vietnam as a combat engineer, he returned home with skills in construction and demolition that he parlayed into a civilian career. He started Mitchell Construction in 1975 with nothing but a beat-up pickup truck, a toolbox, and an unshakable work ethic. For years, he took any job he could find: small home repairs, deck installations, bathroom renovations. He worked 7 days a week, often 16 hours a day, slowly building a reputation for quality work, fair pricing, and absolute reliability. Customers knew that when Bill Mitchell gave his word, the job would be done right and on time. By the time I was born, Mitchell Construction had grown into a respected firm, employing 20 skilled tradesmen. They specialized in custom homes and commercial renovations throughout the Portland metro area. Grandpa Bill had built the business methodically, never taking on more debt than he could handle, always paying his workers fairly and maintaining the highest standards of craftsmanship. Despite his financial success, Grandpa Bill remained humble and frugal. He always wore the same faded Carhartt jacket, drove a beat-up Ford pickup truck with rust spots and a dented tailgate, and lived in the same modest ranch house he'd bought in 1978. His idea of luxury was a good cup of coffee and a weekend fishing trip to the Deschutes River. Money isn't for showing off, he would tell me. It's for security and helping the people you love. Grandpa Bill lived in a modest ranch house about 20 minutes from us, situated on a large lot with mature oak trees and a vegetable garden he tended meticulously. The house itself was unremarkable: 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the 1980s. But the detached garage had been converted into an impressive workshop filled with every tool imaginable. Bandsaws, drill presses, welding equipment, and workbenches covered with ongoing projects lined the walls. I spent countless weekends there as a child, helping him in his workshop where he taught me to use tools and fix things. He would patiently guide my small hands as we built birdhouses, repaired broken toys, or restored old furniture he'd found at estate sales. Sarah, he would say, his weathered hands guiding mine as we worked on projects together. The most important thing in life is earning what you have. Nobody can take away what you've worked for with your own hands. These Saturday workshop sessions became the foundation of our relationship. While other kids my age were watching cartoons or playing video games, I was learning about measuring twice and cutting once, the importance of having the right tool for every job, and the satisfaction that comes from building something useful with your own hands. Grandpa Bill never talked down to me or treated me differently because I was a girl. In his workshop, capability mattered more than gender. He was particularly passionate about education, viewing it as the ultimate tool that nobody could take away from you. Having never attended college himself due to family financial constraints and the Vietnam War, he viewed higher education as the key to opportunities he'd never had. You've got the brains for it, kiddo, he would tell me as we sanded down a piece of furniture or adjusted a cabinet door. I'm going to make sure money never stands in your way like it did mine. It was during one of these conversations, when I was about 12, while we were building a bookshelf for my bedroom, that he first mentioned setting aside money for my college education. We had been discussing my dreams of becoming an engineer, inspired by watching him solve complex construction problems with creative solutions. College is expensive, he said, applying wood stain with careful even strokes. Your parents work hard, but they've got Jessica to think about too, and your dad's company insurance doesn't cover everything your mom needs for her health issues. I hadn't known Mom had health problems at the time. My parents had shielded us from her struggles with chronic migraines and the expensive treatments she required. But don't you worry about money, Grandpa Bill continued. I've been setting aside funds specifically for your education since you were born. Every successful project, every profitable year, I put money away for both you and Jessica. Education is the best investment a person can make. The way he talked about it made it seem like a foregone conclusion that I would attend college and pursue my dreams. While my classmates worried about scholarship applications and student loans, I felt blessed to have a grandfather who understood the value of education and had the means to support it. Years later, I would realize how carefully he had planned this conversation. He wanted me to know that college was possible without creating pressure or entitlement. He wanted me to continue working hard in school because I loved learning, not because I felt guaranteed financial support. It was a delicate balance that spoke to his wisdom and understanding of human nature. When Grandpa Bill passed away from a massive heart attack during my junior year of high school, I was absolutely devastated. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was in AP chemistry class. Mom picked me up from school with red-rimmed eyes and we drove to the hospital in silence. He had been working on a job site, supervising the installation of custom cabinets, when he suddenly collapsed. The paramedics worked on him for 45 minutes, but the damage was too extensive. The funeral was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The chapel was packed beyond capacity with standing room only. Contractors, suppliers, employees, former customers, and community members all came to pay their respects to a man who had lived with integrity and treated everyone fairly. Construction workers in their best suits sat next to bank presidents and city council members. The diversity of the crowd spoke to Grandpa Bill's character. He had earned respect across all social and economic levels through his honesty and work ethic. During the service, speaker after speaker told stories about his fairness, reliability, and willingness to help others. An elderly woman named Mrs. Rodriguez talked about how he had repaired her storm-damaged roof for free after Hurricane Isabel. A young contractor described how Grandpa Bill had mentored him and helped him start his own business. Even competitors spoke about his reputation for honest dealing and quality workmanship. The reception was held at the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall, where hundreds of people shared memories and condolences. I was overwhelmed by the outpouring of respect and affection for a man I had simply known as my grandfather. It was humbling to realize that while I had lost someone precious, the entire community had lost a pillar of integrity and service. At the reception, my father pulled me aside with tears in his eyes. We stepped onto a quiet balcony overlooking the parking lot filled with pickup trucks and work vans, a fitting tribute to Grandpa Bill's legacy. "Sarah, your grandfather left specific instructions about your education," he said solemnly, his voice thick with emotion. "There's a trust fund, $150,000, designated specifically for your college expenses. He spent years building it up, adding money every time Mitchell Construction had a profitable quarter. He wanted to make sure you could focus on your studies without the financial stress he experienced growing up." The amount was staggering to my 17-year-old mind. In 2015, $150,000 represented complete freedom from college debt, the ability to attend any university I wanted, and graduate school possibilities I hadn't dared to dream about. It represented my grandfather's love extending beyond his lifetime, his belief in my potential, and his determination to give me opportunities he'd never had. "Really?" I asked, barely able to process such generosity. "He really saved that much for my education?" "Really," my father confirmed, placing his hands on my shoulders. "But your grandfather had specific conditions. The money can only be used for tuition, books, housing, meal plans, and essential educational expenses. He wanted to ensure it wasn't wasted on partying, luxury items, or non-academic pursuits. We'll manage the fund until you graduate. Then any remaining money will be yours to use for graduate school or your future." Mom nodded in agreement, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Your grandfather was very particular about this, Sarah. He saw too many young people squander educational opportunities because they had too much money and too little supervision. He wanted to protect his investment in your future while ensuring you learned responsibility. This revelation completely transformed my understanding of my post-graduation plans. While my classmates were already stressing about college costs, financial aid applications, and potential student loan debt, I felt blessed beyond measure. My grandfather had not only believed in my dreams, but had actually funded them. This revelation shaped my entire approach to college planning in my senior year of high school. While my classmates spent countless hours researching financial aid options, writing scholarship essays, and calculating potential debt loads, I felt liberated to focus purely on academic fit and program quality. I researched engineering programs across the country, attended college fairs with excitement rather than anxiety, and made campus visits to schools I genuinely wanted to attend rather than only those I could afford. I applied to Oregon State University for their excellent engineering program, which consistently ranked in the top 20 nationally for mechanical engineering. I also applied to several backup schools and a few reach schools, confident that cost wouldn't be the determining factor in my decision. The freedom to choose based on educational quality rather than financial constraints felt like the greatest gift my grandfather could have given me. However, my parents suggested I also apply for scholarships and financial aid despite the trust fund. It never hurts to have backup options, Dad explained during one of our college planning sessions. Your grandfather was wise to prepare for your education, but he also taught us the value of earning what we receive. He would be proud to see you earning additional support through your academic achievements. This advice seemed reasonable and aligned with Grandpa Bill's values about hard work and earning opportunities. I threw myself into scholarship applications, writing essays about my goals, my grandfather's influence, and my commitment to engineering excellence. The process was time-consuming but rewarding, helping me articulate my aspirations and reflect on my motivations. When acceptance letters began arriving in the spring, I was thrilled to be accepted to Oregon State with honors program admission. Even better, I received a partial academic scholarship covering about 40% of my tuition, a significant achievement that made me feel proud of my academic accomplishments. Combined with the trust fund, I calculated that I'd graduate debt-free with money remaining for graduate school. But when freshman year began in September 2016, reality proved dramatically different from my expectations. My parents explained that accessing the trust fund required specific procedures and paperwork through their financial advisor and the bank that managed Grandpa Bill's estate. These things take time, Mom assured me when I asked about delays in receiving the money during our first family weekend visit. Estate law is complicated, and there are tax implications we need to handle properly. We'll cover your expenses initially and reimburse ourselves from the trust fund once everything is processed correctly. The explanation seemed reasonable to my 18-year-old understanding of adult financial matters. I had no experience with estates, trusts, or banking procedures, so I accepted their expertise and guidance. So my parents paid my first semester tuition directly to the university, approximately $12,000 after my scholarship discount. They also provided a modest monthly allowance of $800 for books, supplies, meal plan supplements, and basic living expenses. When I expressed concern about depleting their savings to advance money for my education, Dad waved off my worries with a confident smile. "We're just advancing money we'll recover from the trust fund, sweetheart. It's like a short-term loan to ourselves. Don't worry about it. This is exactly what parents are supposed to do." Mom reinforced this message during our regular phone calls. "Your father and I have always been good at managing money, Sarah. We planned for these kinds of expenses years ago. Focus on your studies and let us handle the financial details." Their reassurances allowed me to immerse myself fully in college life. I declared mechanical engineering as my major, joined the Society of Women Engineers, and threw myself into challenging coursework that included calculus, physics, chemistry, and engineering fundamentals. I maintained a 3.8 GPA while also working part-time at the campus coffee shop to cover personal expenses like clothing, entertainment, and small luxuries. As months passed during my freshman and sophomore years, I began noticing discrepancies between my parents' supposed financial sacrifices and their actual lifestyle choices. They seemed to have plenty of disposable income, despite supposedly advancing thousands of dollars for my education from their personal savings. The changes were gradual at first, but became impossible to ignore. They renovated their kitchen during the summer before my sophomore year, installing granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, custom cabinets, and a wine refrigerator. The project cost approximately $45,000, according to conversations I overheard during family visits. When I commented on the beautiful renovation, Mom explained that they had been saving for years to update the kitchen and decided it was finally time to invest in their home's value. Dad bought a new Audi Q7 in the fall of my sophomore year, trading in his 3-year-old Honda Accord. The luxury SUV featured leather seats, a premium sound system, and every technological upgrade available. He explained it was necessary for his work image when meeting with pharmaceutical executives and hospital administrators. "In my business, perception matters," he said when I admired the vehicle. "Clients need to see success to trust your judgment." Mom started getting expensive monthly spa treatments, including massage therapy, facial treatments, and professional manicures. She also began wearing designer jewelry I'd never seen before, a diamond tennis bracelet, emerald earrings, and a gold necklace with matching pendant. When I asked about the new jewelry, she mentioned that Dad had surprised her for their anniversary and Christmas. They also began taking weekend trips to wine country, attending expensive theatre performances in Portland, and dining at upscale restaurants regularly. Their social media posts showed them at luxury resorts, 5-star restaurants, and exclusive events that clearly cost hundreds or thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, I was living on a strict budget, eating ramen noodles 3 nights a week, buying textbooks used or renting them to save money, and working 15 hours a week at the coffee shop to afford basic necessities like laundry detergent and school supplies. The contrast between our lifestyles was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. But something felt wrong. If they were truly borrowing against their savings to pay my college expenses, how could they afford such luxuries? When I pressed for details about the trust fund timeline, their explanations became vague and contradictory. These financial instruments are complicated, Dad would say. There are tax implications and legal requirements we're working through with our advisor. By sophomore year, my suspicions had grown stronger. I had never seen any documentation related to the trust fund. No account statements, no legal papers, nothing concrete proving its existence. My parents controlled every aspect of my college finances, paying bills directly and providing me only small amounts of cash for incidentals. During Christmas break of my sophomore year, I decided to conduct my own investigation. The inconsistencies in my parents' explanations, combined with their obvious luxury spending, had created doubts I could no longer ignore. While my parents were at their annual holiday party with Dad's pharmaceutical company colleagues, I searched through their home office looking for any trust fund documentation. The office was located in what had originally been a formal dining room, converted with built-in shelves, filing cabinets, and matching desk sets. I felt terrible about snooping, but I needed to understand why accessing my inheritance was supposedly so complicated while they lived increasingly luxurious lifestyles. I searched methodically through filing cabinets, desk drawers, and document boxes. I found bank statements, investment account records, tax returns from multiple years, insurance policies, mortgage documents, and business correspondence, but absolutely nothing mentioning a trust fund for my education. No account statements, no legal documents, no correspondence with financial advisors about trust administration. What I did find was deeply disturbing and painted a picture completely different from what my parents had told me. Bank statements showed regular large deposits that significantly exceeded Dad's known salary from the pharmaceutical company. His base salary was approximately $85,000 annually, but deposits sometimes exceeded $15,000 in a single month. Investment accounts contained significantly more money than I expected based on their supposed financial sacrifice for my education. Instead of depleted savings, their portfolios showed steady growth and substantial balances across multiple accounts. They had money market funds, stock portfolios, bond investments, and retirement accounts that suggested considerable wealth accumulation. Most shocking were credit card statements showing expensive purchases charged to cards I didn't know existed. Premium jewelry from Tiffany & Company, weekend trips to Napa Valley, designer clothing purchases, and expensive restaurant bills, all charged to accounts with high credit limits and paid off in full each month. They weren't struggling financially at all. In fact, they appeared to be thriving beyond anything their known income should have supported. When I confronted them that evening after they returned from the holiday party, their reactions were immediately telling and confirmed my worst suspicions. Mom came through the door laughing about something that had happened at the party, but her expression changed instantly when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table with a serious expression. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. Dad hung up his coat and tie, immediately sensing the tension in the room. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I want to see documentation for the trust fund," I stated directly. "I want to see account statements, legal papers, correspondence with your financial advisor, actual proof that this money exists." Mom immediately became emotional, her face flushing with what looked like panic mixed with indignation. "Sarah, how can you say that? Why would you question us after everything we've done for you?" Dad's response was anger rather than surprise. "What gives you the right to demand information about our financial affairs? We're handling your education expenses exactly as your grandfather intended." "If there's really a trust fund, show me the documentation," I challenged, my heart pounding but my resolve strengthening. "I'm 20 years old. I have a right to know about money left specifically for me." "The trust fund is being managed properly," Dad insisted, his voice rising. "You don't need to worry about the details. Your job is to focus on your studies and let us handle the adult responsibilities." But I couldn't focus on my studies anymore. The uncertainty and inconsistencies were eating away at me, affecting my academic performance and emotional well-being. I was working 20 hours a week at the campus library and coffee shop to cover my personal expenses, living on a strict budget, while my parents enjoyed luxury vacations and designer purchases. "I want to speak with your financial advisor directly," I demanded. "I want to understand the timeline and process for accessing the money." That's not how professional relationships work, Mom said, wiping tears from her eyes. Financial advisors maintain client confidentiality. They can't discuss private matters with unauthorized individuals. I'm not unauthorized, I pointed out. I'm the beneficiary of the trust fund you claim exists, the details. Your job is to focus on your studies. The conversation continued for over 2 hours, growing more heated and revealing as my parents' defense mechanisms kicked in. They tried every tactic possible to avoid providing concrete answers. Guilt, after everything we've sacrificed for you. Anger, how dare you question our integrity. Deflection, you should be grateful instead of suspicious. And manipulation, your grandfather would be disappointed in your attitude. But none of their responses addressed my fundamental question. Where was the actual documentation proving the trust fund existed? Finally, exhausted by the circular arguments and emotional manipulation, I gave them an ultimatum that surprised even me with its firmness. I want to see proof of the trust fund by the end of winter break, or I'm going to start making my own inquiries with banks, lawyers, and estate records. Dad's face turned red with anger. You're being completely unreasonable and disrespectful. We've supported you your entire life, and this is how you repay us? You've supported me with my own money, I replied, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. If that's even true. Mom gasped as if I had slapped her. How can you say such a horrible thing? Because nothing adds up, I said, my voice growing stronger. You claim to be sacrificing your savings for my education, but you're living better than you ever have. You claim the trust fund is delayed by paperwork, but you can't show me a single document. You claim your financial advisor is handling everything, but you won't let me speak with them. I stood up from the kitchen table, my decision crystallizing. I'm going back to school early. When I come home for spring break, I want answers. Real answers with real documentation. The remainder of winter break was tense and uncomfortable. My parents alternated between trying to repair the damage with forced cheerfulness and making passive-aggressive comments about my ungrateful attitude and suspicious nature. Jessica, home from her community college art program, seemed oblivious to the family tension, focused on her photography projects and social life. When I returned to Oregon State in January, I couldn't concentrate on my coursework. The uncertainty about my financial future was consuming my thoughts and affecting my academic performance. I had always been a strong student, but my grades began slipping as I struggled with anxiety about money and family trust. I decided to seek help from the university's financial aid office, explaining my situation to a counselor named Mrs. Patterson. She was a kind woman in her 50s who had worked in higher education for decades and had experience helping students navigate complex family financial situations. What you're describing sounds concerning, she said after listening to my story. Trust funds are legal documents with specific requirements for administration and beneficiary notification. If you're truly the beneficiary, you should have received formal documentation when you turned 18. Mrs. Patterson provided me with information about my rights as a potential trust beneficiary and referred me to the university's legal aid clinic for students. The legal aid attorney, a recent law school graduate named David Chen, agreed to meet with me for a consultation. Based on what you've described, there are several red flags, David explained during our meeting. The lack of documentation, the vague explanations, and the delay tactics all suggest potential problems with the claimed trust fund. He provided me with a list of steps I could take to verify the existence of any trust or estate documents related to my grandfather's will. These included requesting copies of court records from the probate proceedings, contacting the county clerk's office where my grandfather had lived, and potentially hiring a private investigator to trace his estate's distribution. Junior year brought more questions and fewer answers, along with increased financial pressure that made the situation even more urgent. My parents seemed increasingly uncomfortable whenever I mentioned the trust fund, their explanations becoming more convoluted and defensive. They started suggesting I might want to consider student loans for my final year, just as a backup plan in case there were any complications with accessing the remaining trust money. This suggestion made absolutely no sense and confirmed my worst fears. If there was really $150,000 set aside for my education, and I had only used about $60,000 over 2.5 years, why would I need loans for my final year? My total college expenses wouldn't even approach the full amount they had claimed was available. The math simply didn't work. Oregon State's annual costs, including tuition, housing, meal plans, and fees, totaled approximately $28,000 per year after my scholarship discount. Over 4 years, my total expenses should be around $112,000, well within the supposed $150,000 trust fund. Yet, my parents were suggesting I might need additional financing for my senior year. During spring break of my junior year, I decided to take action rather than continue living with uncertainty. I made an appointment with a financial advisor independently, using money I had saved from my campus job and a small emergency fund I had built up over time. The advisor, Margaret Williams, worked for a reputable firm downtown and had extensive experience with estate planning and trust administration. I explained the situation honestly, describing my grandfather's supposed bequest and my parents' claims about the trust fund management. Margaret was direct and informative. If you're the beneficiary of a trust fund, you have specific legal rights to information about that trust. You should have received formal documentation upon reaching age 18, including details about the trust structure, balance, and administration procedures. She continued, trust funds are legal instruments with strict requirements for record keeping and beneficiary notification. Trustees have fiduciary duties to provide regular statements and account for all transactions. The delays and vague explanations you're describing are not consistent with proper trust administration. Margaret also explained that I could request copies of my grandfather's will and estate proceedings through the county probate court where he had lived. Wills are public records once they've been through probate, she explained. You have every right to see what your grandfather actually specified in his estate planning documents. Armed with this knowledge and a growing sense of determination, I drove to Washington County Courthouse the next day to research my grandfather's estate records. The probate clerk was helpful, explaining how to search estate records and providing me with the necessary forms. What I discovered was devastating and confirmed my worst fears. My grandfather's will was indeed on file, having been probated shortly after his death in 2016. I read through every page carefully, my heart sinking with each section. The will was straightforward and clearly written. Grandpa Bill had left his house to my father, his business assets to be sold with proceeds divided among several charities, and specific cash bequests to family members. The section about my education was exactly what I'd hoped to find, and exactly what I had feared I wouldn't find. I bequeathed the sum of $75,000 to my son, Robert Mitchell, with the express condition and legal requirement that this money be used exclusively for the higher education expenses of my granddaughter, Sarah Mitchell. This includes tuition, books, housing, meal plans, and other educational necessities. Any portion not required for Sarah's undergraduate education should be preserved for her potential graduate school expenses or transferred directly to her upon completion of her undergraduate degree. $75,000. Not the $150,000 my parents had claimed, but still a substantial amount that should have covered most of my college expenses. The will also included a specific clause that would prove crucial. Should Robert Mitchell fail to use this bequest, according to these stated conditions, Sarah Mitchell shall have the right to seek legal remediation to recover the misappropriated funds. My grandfather had actually anticipated the possibility of my parents misusing the money and had included legal protection for me. But even more importantly, he had been specific about the amount, and it was exactly half of what my parents had told me. Armed with copies of my grandfather's actual will and a new understanding of exactly how much money should have been available for my education, I returned to my parents' house that evening for what I knew would be the most difficult conversation of my life. I had spent the afternoon in my car outside the courthouse reading and rereading the will, trying to process the magnitude of their deception. They had lied about the amount, $75,000 instead of $150,000. They had lied about the structure. It wasn't a trust fund, but a direct bequest to my father with conditions. And most importantly, they had lied about using the money for my education while spending it on themselves. When I walked into the house, my parents were in the living room watching television, looking relaxed and comfortable in their beautifully renovated home. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was surrounded by improvements likely funded with money meant for my education. "We need to talk," I announced, setting my purse down on the coffee table with more force than necessary. Mom looked up with a concerned expression. "Sarah, you look upset. What's wrong?" "I went to the courthouse today," I said without preamble. I read Grandpa Bill's actual will. The colour drained from both of their faces instantly. Dad fumbled for the television remote, turning off the programme they had been watching. The sudden silence in the room was deafening. "Sarah," Dad started, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Let me tell you what I learned," I continued, my voice remarkably steady despite my internal turmoil. "Grandpa left $75,000 for my education, not $150,000. It wasn't a trust fund. It was a direct bequest to you, Dad, with specific legal conditions that you use every penny for my college expenses." I pulled out the photocopied pages of the will. "Would you like me to read the exact wording? Because it's very clear about what the money was supposed to be used for." Mom began crying immediately, not the manipulative tears I had seen before, but genuine sobs of someone who knew they had been caught in a terrible lie. Dad sat in stunned silence, staring at the will documents as if they might disappear. "How much is left?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Sarah, we can explain," Dad finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How much is left?" I repeated louder this time. Mom looked up through her tears. "About $15,000. $15,000. Out of $75,000 my grandfather had left specifically for my education, only $15,000 remained. They had spent $60,000 on themselves, while allowing me to believe they were making financial sacrifices for my education, and that much more money was available for my future. The betrayal was complete and devastating. For almost 3 years, I had been grateful for their supposed generosity, working multiple jobs to avoid being a burden, while they systematically stole my inheritance. I had worried about imposing on their finances while they renovated their kitchen with my money. I had eaten ramen noodles and shopped at thrift stores while they wore designer clothes purchased with my grandfather's gift. I want a complete accounting of how every dollar was spent, I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. I want the remaining $15,000 transferred to an account in my name immediately, and I want a written repayment plan for the $60,000 you stole from me. We didn't steal anything, Dad protested weakly. We invested some of the money in family assets that benefit everyone, including you. You invested my education money in a kitchen renovation and luxury car? I asked incredulously. How does your oldie benefit my education? Everything we've done has been for this family, Mom said, still crying. The house improvements increase the property value, which will benefit you when we're gone. Dad's car helps maintain his professional image, which supports his income that helps support you. The twisted logic was astounding. They had convinced themselves that stealing my inheritance was actually a form of investment on my behalf. But even this revised figure didn't add up. My college expenses for 3 years had totaled about $80,000. If they had received $75,000 for my education, they should have only advanced about $5,000 of their own money. Yet they had been acting as though they were making major financial sacrifices. Where's the money now? I demanded. Another long silence. Finally, Dad spoke. Some of it has been used for your education as intended. Some of it we invested, hoping to grow it to better support you. Invested in what? Various things. The kitchen renovation increased our home's value, which benefits the whole family, including you. The new car was necessary for Dad's work, which maintains his income that supports your education. We made strategic investments that would benefit everyone. I stared at them in disbelief. You spent my inheritance money on kitchen renovations and a luxury car? We spent some of it on family investments, Mom corrected. Everything we do benefits you too. The betrayal was staggering. My grandfather had specifically left money for my education, and my parents had spent it on themselves while lying to me about the amount and their sacrifices. How much is left? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad shifted uncomfortably. The investments haven't performed as expected. There were some losses. How much is left? I repeated, louder this time. About $15,000, Mom admitted. $15,000. Out of $75,000 my grandfather had left specifically for my education, only $15,000 remained. They had spent $60,000 on themselves while allowing me to believe they were making sacrifices for my education. I felt sick. For 3 years, I had been grateful for their supposed generosity, working hard to justify their investment in my future. Meanwhile, they had been systematically stealing my inheritance while portraying themselves as devoted parents. I want the remaining money transferred to an account in my name immediately, I demanded. Sarah, you're overreacting, Dad said. We've been managing your grandfather's gift responsibly. You're getting an excellent education, which is exactly what he wanted. He wanted his money used for my education, not for your kitchen and car, I shot back. You lied to me about the amount and you've stolen from me for 3 years. Mom began crying again. We never meant to hurt you. We've always provided for your needs. You're still getting your education. Through lies and theft, I replied. And what about my senior year? How exactly did you plan to pay for that with only $15,000 left? The question hung in the air unanswered, because the truth was obvious. They had never planned properly for my final year. They had spent my inheritance money on themselves, without considering the full cost of my education. That night I called my Aunt Karen, my father's sister who lived in Seattle. I needed to talk to someone outside my immediate family about what I had discovered. Aunt Karen listened to my story with growing concern. Sarah, your grandfather specifically told me he was leaving money for your college education. He was so proud of your academic achievements and wanted to ensure you could pursue your dreams without financial burden. Did he ever mention the exact amount to you? I asked. Yes, she said firmly. It was $75,000. He showed me the will provision when he updated it after your high school graduation. He was very specific that the money was for your education only. This confirmed what my parents had finally admitted, but it also raised new questions. Aunt Karen, did Grandpa ever mention anything about giving the money to my parents to manage, or was it supposed to come directly to me? He specifically said he was leaving it to your parents because you were still a minor, but with explicit instructions that every penny was to be used for your education. He didn't trust that you would make responsible financial decisions at 18, but he completely trusted your parents to honour his wishes. The irony was heartbreaking. Grandpa Bill had trusted my parents with his gift, and they had violated that trust completely. What should I do? I asked Aunt Karen. You need to see the will yourself, she advised. You have a right to know exactly what your grandfather intended. I still have a copy if your parents won't show you theirs. The next day, I drove to Seattle to meet with Aunt Karen. She provided me with a copy of Grandpa Bill's will, and reading his actual words was devastating. The relevant section was clear and unambiguous. I bequeathed the sum of $75,000 to my son, Robert Mitchell, with the express condition and legal requirement that this money be used exclusively for the higher education expenses of my granddaughter, Sarah Mitchell. This includes tuition, books, housing, meal plans, and other educational necessities. Any portion not required for Sarah's undergraduate education should be preserved for her potential graduate school expenses or transferred directly to her upon completion of her undergraduate degree. The will also included a specific clause. Should Robert Mitchell fail to use this bequest according to these stated conditions, Sarah Mitchell shall have the right to seek legal remediation to recover the misappropriated funds. My grandfather had actually anticipated the possibility of my parents misusing the money and had included legal protection for me. Armed with this documentation, I returned to Portland determined to confront my parents once more. But this time, I was prepared for legal action if necessary. When I presented them with the copy of the will, their faces went pale. The legal language was unmistakable. They had violated the explicit terms of their inheritance. "We can explain," Dad started, but I cut him off. "There's nothing to explain. Grandpa's will is perfectly clear. You were legally required to use this money only for my education. Instead, you spent most of it on yourselves and lied to me about the amount." "We did use it for your education," Mom protested weakly. "You used maybe $20,000 on my actual education. You spent the other $55,000 on kitchen renovations, a luxury car, and who knows what else. That's theft." I pulled out my phone and showed them a contact I had already saved. I've consulted with an attorney who specializes in estate and trust disputes. According to her, you've committed breach of fiduciary duty and potentially fraud. I can file a civil lawsuit to recover the money you stole, plus interest and legal fees." The threat of legal action finally broke through their denial. Dad's anger returned full force. "You would sue your own parents over money?" he demanded. "After everything we've done for you?" "After everything you've stolen from me," I corrected. "This isn't just money, Dad. This is my grandfather's love and his sacrifice for my future. He worked his entire life building his business so he could help me get an education. You betrayed both of us." Mom was crying harder now. "We can pay you back," she offered. "We can take out a loan or something." "With what income?" I asked. "You've clearly been living beyond your means already. How exactly would you pay back $60,000 plus interest?" The reality was they couldn't. They had spent money they didn't own on lifestyle upgrades they couldn't afford, and now they faced the consequences. "I want a full accounting of how every dollar was spent," I demanded. "I want the remaining $15,000 transferred to my control immediately. And I want a written repayment plan for the $60,000 you stole with interest." Dad's face was red with anger. "You're being completely unreasonable. We've supported you your entire life. We've provided for your education." "You've supported me with my own money," I replied. "And you've been lying about your sacrifices while living off my inheritance." The conversation continued for hours, with my parents attempting every form of justification and rationalization possible. They claimed the kitchen renovation was an investment in the family home that would benefit me eventually through inheritance. They argued that Dad's luxury car was necessary for maintaining his professional image and income. They suggested their weekend trips and spa treatments were stress relief that allowed them to better support me emotionally. But nothing could change the fundamental facts. They had violated a legal obligation, lied to me repeatedly about the amount and structure of my inheritance, and spent my education money on personal luxuries while watching me struggle financially. The will specifically states that any money not used for my undergraduate education should be saved for graduate school or transferred to me directly, I pointed out, reading from the legal document. Instead, you spent it on yourselves, and now I'm supposed to take out loans for my senior year. Dad's response revealed the depth of his self-justification. "We raised you, fed you, clothed you, and provided for you for 18 years. Using some of that money for family improvements was just delayed compensation for all our sacrifices." This twisted logic was perhaps the most infuriating part of their entire defense. They truly believed they were entitled to my inheritance money because they had fulfilled their basic parental obligations. "Parents are supposed to support their children," I replied, my voice rising. "That's what you sign up for when you decide to have kids. You don't get to steal their inheritance money as payment for doing your job as a parent." Mom tried a different approach. "We always planned to pay it back, Sarah. We just needed to borrow against it temporarily while we got through some financial difficulties." "What financial difficulties?" I challenged. "Your bank statements show regular income, growing investments, and luxury purchases. You weren't in financial trouble. You were living beyond your means with my money." The truth was becoming crystal clear. My parents had seen my inheritance as an easy source of funding for lifestyle upgrades they couldn't otherwise afford. They had convinced themselves that since they were my parents, they were entitled to use the money however they saw fit, regardless of my grandfather's specific instructions or my future needs. Finally, after hours of circular arguments and failed justifications, I gave them a final ultimatum. "You have 1 week to provide me with a complete accounting of how every dollar was spent and a realistic repayment plan for the money you stole. If you don't, I'm filing a lawsuit to recover the money plus damages and interest." Dad's face flushed with anger. "You would actually sue your own parents over money? After everything we've done for you?" "After everything you've stolen from me," I corrected. "This isn't just money, Dad. This is my grandfather's love and his sacrifice for my future. He worked his entire life building his business so he could help me get an education. You betrayed both of us. I left their house that night and didn't return. Instead, I stayed with a friend from high school and waited to see how they would respond to my demands. 3 days later, I received a call from Jessica, who was clearly upset and confused about the family situation. Sarah, what have you done to Mom and Dad? They're completely freaking out, crying all the time and talking about losing the house. I explained the entire situation to my sister, showing her copies of the will and evidence of our parents' financial deception. Jessica's reaction was disappointing but not entirely surprising. So what if they used some of the money for the family? She said after hearing everything. They still got you through most of college. You're being really dramatic about this. Jessica, they stole $60,000 that Grandpa left specifically for my education, I explained patiently. Money that was legally designated for me, not for them. And they used it to improve our family home and support Dad's career, she replied, clearly influenced by our parents' rationalization. That benefits all of us in the long run. You're going to destroy the family over money. I realized that Jessica had been completely manipulated by our parents' version of events. To her, I was the unreasonable one for demanding accountability and honesty from people who had stolen from me. I realized that Jessica had been influenced by our parents' rationalization. To her, the theft was justified because the family as a whole had benefited. What if Grandpa had left money specifically for your art education, and I had spent it on a luxury car while telling you it was for your benefit? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. That's different. How? She couldn't answer, but her loyalty remained with our parents. This conversation showed me that the family divide would extend beyond my parents to include my sister. A week passed with no communication from my parents. True to my word, I filed a civil lawsuit seeking recovery of the misappropriated funds plus interest, court costs and attorney fees. The lawsuit documents were served to my parents on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing non-stop with calls from extended family members who had been contacted by my parents seeking support. The family reactions were predictably divided. Aunt Karen stood firmly behind me, having known Grandpa Bill's actual intentions. Uncle Mike, Dad's younger brother, was sympathetic but urged me to work things out as a family rather than through the courts. My mom's side of the family was largely critical of my legal action. Grandma Ruth, my maternal grandmother, called me to express her disappointment. Sarah, honey, you don't sue family, she said. There has to be another way to resolve this. Grandma, they stole $60,000 from me and lied about it for years, I explained. What other way is there? Forgiveness, dear. Family is more important than money. Family doesn't steal from each other, I replied. If family was really more important than money to them, they wouldn't spend my inheritance on themselves. These conversations were painful but necessary. I was learning who in my family truly understood the principles of honesty and accountability versus those who prioritized family loyalty over justice. The legal process moved slowly but steadily. During discovery, my attorney subpoenaed my parents' financial records, revealing the full extent of their deception. They had indeed spent nearly $60,000 of my inheritance on personal luxuries while claiming financial hardship in supporting my education. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed the $75,000 inheritance being deposited into their account, then gradually spent over 3 years on home improvements, car payments, vacation expenses, and other personal items. Meanwhile, their actual out-of-pocket expenses for my education totaled only about $18,000. 6 months after filing the lawsuit, my parents' attorney approached mine with a settlement offer. They would repay $50,000 of the $60,000 if they had misappropriated, plus my legal fees in exchange for dropping the lawsuit. Why not the full amount? I asked my attorney. They're claiming they spent some of the money on legitimate educational expenses and family investments that indirectly benefited you, she explained. It's a reasonable offer considering the costs and uncertainty of going to trial. I was torn. Part of me wanted to fight for every penny, but another part was exhausted from the family conflict and legal stress. After much consideration, I accepted the settlement. My parents agreed to pay $50,000 plus $8,000 in legal fees through a structured payment plan over 4 years. They also had to provide a written acknowledgement that they had violated the terms of my grandfather's bequest and acted improperly. The day we signed the settlement agreement was surreal. Sitting in a conference room with my parents, our respective attorneys, and a court mediator, I felt a mixture of victory and sadness. I was getting most of my money back, but the cost to our family relationships was immeasurable. My father looked defeated, his pride obviously wounded by having to admit wrongdoing in a legal document. My mother seemed smaller somehow, aged by months of legal stress and family conflict. I hope this makes you happy, Dad said bitterly as we left the courthouse. It makes things right, I corrected. That's different from happy. The settlement money allowed me to complete my senior year without additional financial stress. I also had enough remaining to start graduate school in mechanical engineering the following fall, which is what I had always planned to do with any leftover money from my inheritance. But the family relationships remained fractured. My parents and I maintained minimal contact, speaking only when necessary and avoiding any meaningful discussions about what had happened. Jessica continued to support them, creating additional distance between us. Some extended family members gradually came to understand my position, especially after learning the full details of my parents' deception. Others remained critical of my decision to pursue legal action. The experience taught me profound lessons about trust, integrity, and the difference between enabling and supporting someone. My parents had betrayed not only my trust, but also my grandfather's final wishes. Their inability to accept responsibility for their actions made reconciliation impossible. A year after the settlement, as I walked across the stage to receive my engineering degree, I thought about Grandpa Bill. Despite my parents' betrayal, his dream for my education had been realized. I had graduated debt-free and was starting graduate school with the foundation he had worked so hard to provide. The victory felt bittersweet without my parents there to celebrate with me. Aunt Karen attended the ceremony, as did several friends who had become like family during the difficult period. Their presence reminded me that family isn't always defined by blood, but by who shows up for you when it matters most. Looking back now, 2 years later, I believe I made the right choice in pursuing legal action. My parents had committed a serious violation of trust that extended beyond our family to include disrespecting my grandfather's memory and final wishes. While I occasionally feel sad about the ongoing family estrangement, I don't feel guilty about holding them accountable. They had multiple opportunities to admit their wrongdoing and make things right before I involved attorneys. They chose to maintain their deception until forced to confront it legally. The money I recovered has served its intended purpose, funding my graduate education and providing financial security as I start my career. But more importantly, standing up for myself taught me to value my own worth and demand honesty in all relationships, even with family members. Some people have asked if I would handle things differently, knowing the cost to family relationships. My answer is always the same. I would demand honesty and accountability again, because those principles matter more than maintaining comfortable lies. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild completely. My parents may eventually understand the gravity of their actions, but that understanding would have to come from genuine remorse rather than resentment about being caught. My grandfather worked his entire life to provide opportunities for his family. He deserved to have his final wishes honoured, and I deserve to benefit from his love and sacrifice as he intended. Fighting for that wasn't selfish or vindictive. It was honouring his memory and protecting my future. 2 years later, as I sit at my own apartment writing this story, I can reflect on how dramatically my life changed after that confrontation. The legal battle that followed was long, expensive, and emotionally draining, but ultimately successful. My parents were forced to acknowledge their breach of fiduciary duty and agree to a structured repayment plan that would restore most of my stolen inheritance over time. The immediate aftermath was chaotic and painful. True to my word, when my parents failed to provide the accounting and repayment plan I had demanded, I filed a civil lawsuit seeking recovery of the misappropriated funds plus interest, court costs, and attorney fees. The legal documents were served to them at their home, and within hours my phone was ringing constantly with calls from extended family members who had been contacted by my parents seeking support and sympathy. The family reactions were predictably divided and revealed uncomfortable truths about relatives I thought I knew well. My father's sister, Aunt Karen, who lived in Seattle, stood firmly behind me after learning the full details of the situation. She had known about Grandpa Bill's specific intentions for the education money and was appalled by my parents' actions. "Your grandfather would be heartbroken," she told me during one of our lengthy phone conversations. "He trusted your parents completely and specifically chose to give them the money rather than setting up a formal trust because he believed they would honour his wishes. They betrayed not just you, but his memory as well." Uncle Mike, Dad's younger brother, was more conflicted. While he acknowledged that my parents had acted inappropriately, he urged me to work things out as a family rather than through the courts. "Lawsuits tear families apart forever," he warned. "There has to be another way to resolve this." But my maternal grandmother, Ruth, was openly critical of my decision to pursue legal action. "Sarah, honey, you don't sue family," she said during a tearful phone call. "There has to be forgiveness in your heart. Family is more important than money." "Grandma, they stole $60,000 from me and lied about it for years," I explained. "What other way is there to hold them accountable?" "Forgiveness, dear. Family loyalty matters more than money." "If family was really more important than money to them, they wouldn't have stolen my inheritance," I replied. These conversations were painful, but educational. I was learning who in my family truly understood principles of honesty and accountability versus those who prioritized family loyalty over justice, regardless of the circumstances. The legal process moved slowly but steadily forward. During the discovery phase, my attorney subpoenaed my parents' financial records, revealing the full extent of their deception and the specific ways they had spent my inheritance money. Bank records showed the $75,000 inheritance being deposited into their joint account immediately after Grandpa Bill's estate was settled, then gradually spent over the following 3 years, The evidence was overwhelming and impossible to dispute. They had spent approximately $45,000 on the kitchen renovation, $25,000 on Dad's luxury car down payment, $15,000 on vacation trips and entertainment, $8,000 on designer clothing and jewellery for Mom, and smaller amounts on various personal luxuries. Meanwhile, their actual out-of-pocket expenses for my education totaled only about $18,000 over 3 years. The documentation revealed a pattern of systematic deception that extended beyond the theft itself. They had maintained separate accounts for their personal spending while claiming to their financial advisor and insurance agent that they were making significant sacrifices to support my education. They had even claimed tax deductions for educational expenses they never actually paid. 6 months after filing the lawsuit, my parents' attorney approached mine with a settlement offer. They would repay $55,000 of the $60,000 they had misappropriated, plus my legal fees totaling $12,000 in exchange for dropping the lawsuit and agreeing not to pursue criminal charges. Why not the full amount? I asked my attorney. They're claiming they spent some of the money on legitimate educational expenses and family investments that indirectly benefited you, she explained. Given the costs and uncertainty of going to trial, plus the fact that they genuinely don't have enough liquid assets to repay everything immediately, it's a reasonable offer. I was torn between accepting the settlement and fighting for every penny in court. Part of me wanted complete vindication and full restitution, but another part was exhausted from months of family conflict and legal stress. The emotional toll of the situation was affecting my academic performance, my relationships with friends, and my overall mental health. After consulting with my therapist, who I had started seeing to cope with the family trauma, I decided to accept the settlement. The money would allow me to complete my senior year without additional financial stress and provide a foundation for graduate school or early career expenses. The day we signed the settlement agreement was surreal and emotionally complex. Sitting in a conference room with my parents, our respective attorneys, and a court mediator, I felt a mixture of victory, sadness, and finality. I was getting most of my money back, but the cost to our family relationships was immeasurable and probably permanent. My father looked defeated and aged, his pride obviously wounded by having to admit wrongdoing in a legal document and agree to supervised repayment terms. My mother seemed smaller and more fragile, aged by months of legal stress and the public exposure of their financial deception. "I hope this makes you happy," Dad said bitterly as we left the courthouse, his first words to me in months. "It makes things right," I corrected. "That's different from happy." The settlement money allowed me to complete my senior year at Oregon State without the financial anxiety that had plagued me since discovering the truth about my inheritance. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in mechanical engineering and had enough money remaining to begin graduate school in environmental engineering the following fall, focusing on sustainable water systems design. But the family relationships remained fractured, possibly beyond repair. My parents and I maintained minimal contact, speaking only when absolutely necessary for legal or practical reasons. Jessica continued to support them and view me as the family troublemaker, creating additional distance between us that persisted even after I tried multiple times to explain my position and show her the legal documentation. Some extended family members gradually came to understand my position, especially after learning the complete details of my parents' deception and the specific provisions in Grandpa Bill's will. Others remained critical of my decision to pursue legal action, viewing it as a betrayal of family loyalty regardless of the circumstances. The experience taught me profound and lasting lessons about trust, integrity, and the difference between enabling bad behavior and truly supporting someone. My parents had betrayed not only my trust, but also my grandfather's final wishes and the legal obligations they had accepted when they received his bequest. Their inability to accept responsibility for their actions, even when confronted with overwhelming evidence, made reconciliation impossible. Looking back now, I believe I made the right choice in pursuing legal action. My parents had committed a serious violation of trust that extended far beyond our family dynamics, to include disrespecting my grandfather's memory and his specific intentions for helping my education. While I occasionally feel sad about the ongoing family estrangement, I don't feel guilty about holding them accountable for their actions. They had multiple opportunities to admit their wrongdoing and work with me to develop a fair repayment plan before I involved attorneys. Instead, they chose to maintain their deception, minimize their actions, and blame me for being unreasonable and ungrateful when I demanded honesty and accountability. The money I recovered through the legal settlement has served its intended purpose, funding the completion of my undergraduate education and providing financial security as I pursue graduate studies and start my career in environmental engineering. But more importantly, standing up for myself taught me to value my own worth and demand honesty in all relationships, even with family members who are supposed to love and protect me. Some people have asked if I would handle the situation differently, knowing the cost to family relationships. My answer is always the same. I would demand honesty and accountability again, because those principles matter more than maintaining comfortable lies or enabling destructive behavior for the sake of family peace. Trust, once broken through deliberate deception and theft, is nearly impossible to rebuild completely. My parents may eventually come to understand the full gravity of their actions, but that understanding would have to come from genuine remorse and accountability rather than resentment about being caught and forced to face consequences. My grandfather worked his entire life to build his construction business and accumulate enough wealth to provide educational opportunities for his grandchildren. He deserved to have his final wishes honoured, and I deserved to benefit from his love and sacrifice exactly as he intended. Fighting for that wasn't selfish or vindictive, it was honouring his memory, protecting my future, and maintaining the integrity he taught me through his example. For anyone facing similar family betrayals involving money, inheritances, or violations of trust, I would strongly encourage seeking legal advice and understanding your rights. Family loyalty should never come at the expense of justice, and enabling dishonest behaviour only encourages it to continue and escalate. The hardest lesson I learned was that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting painful consequences to relationships, including relationships with people you love. But living with integrity, even when it's difficult and costly, ultimately leads to more authentic connections, genuine self-respect, and the ability to sleep peacefully knowing you stood up for what was right. Have you ever discovered financial betrayal by family members? How did you balance loyalty with accountability? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary for maintaining your dignity, protecting your future, and honouring the people who sacrifice to help you succeed. If this story resonated with you, please upvote and share it with others who might need encouragement to seek justice, even when it means confronting family members. Sometimes the people who should protect us most are the ones who harm us most deeply, and that's never acceptable, regardless of biological relationships or family expectations.